On September 10, 2001, the world seemed normal, oblivious to the horrors that awaited. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld stood before reporters, admitting that the Pentagon couldn't account for $2.3 trillion. This staggering sum, larger than the entire economies of many nations, had simply vanished. The next day, the world watched in horror as terrorists attacked the United States. The Twin Towers crumbled, a symbol of American might reduced to rubble. The Pentagon, still grappling with its own internal crisis, became a target itself. Amidst the chaos and carnage, the missing trillions faded from public view. The Bush administration, seizing the opportunity presented by the attacks, quickly pointed the finger at Al-Qaeda. The attacks of September 11th were a watershed moment in American history. The nation, accustomed to feeling safe and secure within its borders, was suddenly vulnerable. The Bush administration, led by figures like Vice President Dick Cheney and Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, saw an opportunity. They recognized that the fear and anger gripping the nation could be harnessed to advance a neoconservative agenda. This agenda called for a more assertive and militaristic foreign policy. The 9/11 attacks provided the pretext to put this agenda into action. The administration, exploiting the public's desire for revenge and security, began to build a case for war against Iraq. They alleged that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction and harbored ties to Al-Qaeda. The Bush administration, having successfully linked 9/11 to the broader war on terror, now needed a tangible target to maintain the momentum of their campaign. Iraq, still reeling from the Gulf War and burdened by international sanctions, became the focal point of their strategy. Saddam Hussein, a brutal dictator with a history of human rights abuses, was an easy target for demonization. His oppressive regime had long been a thorn in the side of the international community. They needed to convince the American people, and indeed the world, that Iraq posed a direct and imminent threat to global security. They resurrected the specter of WMDs, claiming that Hussein was actively developing chemical, biological, and even nuclear weapons. These claims were designed to instill fear and urgency. These weapons, they argued, could fall into the hands of terrorists, posing an existential threat to the United States and its allies. The potential for such a scenario was used to justify preemptive action. The administration embarked on a carefully orchestrated campaign of misinformation and fear-mongering, utilizing every available media outlet to spread their message. They leaked cherry-picked intelligence reports to the media, often exaggerating or distorting the findings to fit their narrative. This manipulation of information was crucial in swaying public opinion and garnering support for military intervention. Despite growing public protests and anti-war demonstrations, the administration remained steadfast in its pursuit of war, determined to achieve its objectives at any cost. The Bush administration's case for war rested heavily on the assertion that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction. This claim was central to their argument, as they sought to justify military intervention in the Middle East. Secretary of State Colin Powell, in a now infamous address to the United Nations Security Council, presented what he claimed was irrefutable evidence of Iraq's WMD program. His speech was meticulously crafted to persuade both the international community and the American public. Powell, relying on flawed intelligence and fabricated evidence, painted a chilling picture of Iraqi mobile biological weapons labs and secret stockpiles of chemical weapons. He described these labs as being capable of producing deadly agents that could be deployed at a moment's notice. He warned that Hussein was on the verge of acquiring nuclear weapons, capable of unleashing unimaginable devastation. The specter of a nuclear-armed Iraq was used to stoke fear and urgency. Powell's presentation had a profound impact on public opinion. It was a pivotal moment that swayed many who were previously undecided about the necessity of war. Many Americans, still reeling from the trauma of 9/11, were convinced that Iraq posed an existential threat. The fear of another catastrophic attack on American soil was a powerful motivator. The international community, however, was more skeptical, arguing for continued diplomacy and weapons inspections. They believed that war should be a last resort, only after all other options had been exhausted. The Bush administration dismissed these concerns, accusing them of appeasement. They argued that waiting any longer would only give Hussein more time to develop his weapons and pose an even greater threat. As the Bush administration ratcheted up its war rhetoric, a curious document surfaced purporting to show that Iraq was attempting to purchase uranium from Niger. This yellowcake uranium became a central piece of evidence in the administration's case for war. President Bush cited the alleged Niger uranium deal as proof that Iraq was actively seeking to develop nuclear weapons. The problem, however, was that the document was a crude forgery, riddled with factual errors. The CIA had warned the White House that the Niger uranium claims were based on flimsy evidence. The administration ignored these warnings, using the forged document to bolster their case for war. The Bush administration, having laid the groundwork for war, now faced the task of selling it to the American people. They embarked on a sophisticated propaganda campaign, utilizing the media and public figures to disseminate their message of fear and urgency. The administration framed the war as a necessary measure to protect the homeland from a dangerous and unpredictable enemy. The media largely played along, amplifying the administration's claims. News networks often presented the administration's narrative uncritically. The administration, skilled at manipulating the media, understood the power of imagery and emotion. These carefully choreographed spectacles helped to solidify public support for the war. On March 20, 2003, the United States, with the support of a coalition of the willing, launched its invasion of Iraq. The invasion, dubbed Operation Iraqi Freedom, began with a massive aerial bombardment of Baghdad and other key Iraqi cities. The shock and awe campaign unleashed a torrent of firepower on a nation ill-prepared for such an onslaught. The Iraqi military crumbled quickly in the face of the American-led assault. Within weeks, coalition forces had seized control of Baghdad, toppling Saddam Hussein's regime. The swift victory seemed to vindicate their decision to go to war. Images of jubilant Iraqis tearing down statues of Saddam Hussein filled television screens. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly effortless victory lay a more complex and troubling reality. With the fall of Baghdad, the Bush administration's attention turned to uncovering the weapons of mass destruction that had served as the primary justification for the war. Confident that such weapons would be found, teams of inspectors were dispatched to scour the country. However, as weeks turned into months, the search came up empty. No stockpiles of chemical or biological weapons were found. The failure to find WMDs cast a long shadow over the Bush administration's credibility. The damage was done, undermining public trust and fueling a growing anti-war movement. The initial euphoria that greeted the fall of Saddam Hussein's regime quickly gave way to a sobering reality. The Bush administration, having toppled the Iraqi government, had no clear plan for what would come next. The occupation authority struggled to maintain order and provide basic services. The disbanding of the Iraqi army created a large pool of unemployed and disgruntled men. These men became a ready recruiting pool for the insurgency that was rapidly gaining strength. The Bush administration found themselves bogged down in a protracted and bloody conflict. The Iraq War, launched on a foundation of lies and deception, exacted a devastating toll on the Iraqi people. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqi civilians were killed in the violence that engulfed the nation. Millions more were displaced from their homes. The war shattered Iraq's infrastructure, crippling its economy. The legacy of the Iraq War is a stark reminder of the human cost of deception. Sold to the American people on false pretenses, the war resulted in the deaths of thousands of American soldiers. The Iraq War, a defining event of the 21st century, had a profound and enduring impact on the Middle East and the world. It reshaped geopolitical dynamics and altered the course of history in ways that are still being felt today. The war destabilized the region, unleashing forces that continue to shape events today. The power vacuum left in the wake of the conflict allowed various factions to vie for control, leading to widespread instability. The rise of ISIS can be directly traced back to the chaos and instability created by the Iraq War. This extremist group capitalized on the disorder, spreading terror and violence across multiple countries. The war also exacerbated sectarian tensions in the region. Long-standing rivalries between different ethnic and religious groups were inflamed, leading to increased violence and division. This rivalry has played out in conflicts across the Middle East, further destabilizing the region. Countries like Syria and Yemen have seen prolonged and devastating wars. partly fueled by these sectarian divides. The Iraq War also had a significant impact on American politics and society. It led to a reevaluation of foreign policy and military strategy, influencing decisions in subsequent administrations. Deeply unpopular by the time President Barack Obama took office, it fueled a growing anti-war movement. Protests and public outcry highlighted the war's unpopularity and the desire for a change in direction. The legacy of the Iraq War is a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked executive power and the importance of a free and independent press. It serves as a lesson for future generations on the complexities and consequences of military intervention.